Councillor Wicks, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This proposed consultation is the last significant consultation on the draft local plan. The last one on the submission is a much narrower and more technical consultation. I therefore think it's important that our residents have a meaningful chance to comment now on what is as near as possible to the final version. As I said when I spoke at Scrutiny Committee, I do think we should have a sound local plan. But I expressed strong concern about the housing target numbers being too high, about the proposed spatial distribution of that housing being unbalanced, and about the lack of recognition of Greenbelt as a constraint. On these points, nothing has changed since the first draft of the draft plan. On numbers, the heart of the plan, from which all decisions on sites for housing flow, many of us were delighted 3 weeks ago today that the ONS revised downwards its forecast for Guildford's population growth. Only in local government, I suspect, could anyone claim that 3 weeks was too short a time to evaluate the revised data and reflect it. I and others outside made the case for re-examining the choice of data and assumptions used on population, particularly the long-term migration assumptions. To recap, GL Hearn used a 5-year run of data to project forward, which contained a blip in international students, which is unlikely to recur. A 10-year run of data would be a sounder basis for prediction. We are a special case and should make that case for using that data. The draft plan contains a 20% buffer, bringing forward housing from later years to the first 5 years, because we have chosen to classify ourselves as persistent under-deliverers of housing. Yet until the recession had well and truly set in, we were delivering on target. DCLG reported on May the 23rd this year that in 2011-12, housing starts countrywide were 1/3 lower than in 2007-8. There was nothing special about Guildford falling behind in the recession. The NPPG says the assessment of a local delivery record is likely to be more robust if a longer-term view is taken, since this is likely to take account of the peaks and troughs of the housing market cycle. It is the use of this buffer which puts particular pressure to build in the green belt around villages, since houses there can be delivered quickly. I think we should be making a strong case for the standard 5% buffer. We still have not included in the draft plan any allowance for windfalls, and note there were applications for 17 units last week, 18 units this week in conversions from office to residential, and for bringing empty houses back into use. They would reduce the need for new sites and over 20 years add up to a significant number. Nothing has changed either in relation to the distribution of proposed housing sites, in spite of the fact that the concentration of thousands of houses proposed in a small area in the east of the borough will have a devastating effect. Nor has the view that the Greenbelt is in principle available for development when the NPPF says clearly that unmet housing need is unlikely to outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt to constitute the very special circumstances justifying inappropriate development. In his letter to the Chief Executive of the Planning Inspectorate, the employer of the Planning Inspector who will examine our local plan, written on March the 3rd, Nick Bowles said, quote, "The NPPF makes clear that a Greenbelt boundary may be altered only in exceptional circumstances and reiterates the importance and permanence of the Greenbelt. The special role of the Greenbelt is also recognised in the framing of the presumption in favour of sustainable development, which sets out that authorities should meet objectively assessed needs unless specific policies in the framework indicate development should be restricted. Crucially, Greenbelt is identified as one such policy." Unquote. That's what the Planning Minister thinks, but this plan has not taken it into account. I must now move on to the specific decision to include a site for a secondary school in West Clarendon with no prior consultation with ward councillors or the parish council. This was a last-minute decision. I understand no detailed assessment was made of the suitability of the site. The school would be located in a squash site liable to flood on a busy road by a humpback bridge. So whilst I support preparing a plan, I think this draft requires significant amendment before it goes out to consultation, and I cannot support its approval in its current form. I've proposed that we should get the numbers right, give proper recognition to the Greenbelt, and reappraise the distribution of housing sites, aiming to have a much revised draft ready for consultation in September and October.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.